Oops. Oh, hey. What's up, everyone, and welcome back to Learning C++. My name is Joe, and today we are going to be learning a little bit more about functions, specifically functions that return a value. Up to this point, we have dealt with functions returning a value because our main function that we use and is required in every program that we create is returning that zero value as an integer, but it's not really doing anything with that in the program. It's kind of just our way to know outside of the program that everything went smoothly. So I went ahead, already created an example 2.4 project. I'm going to start creating the projects before the video, since I'm guessing you guys probably know how to do that by now. So for this program, it's going to be called Sqrt, and that actually stands for square root. So we have our source file created here, and let me go ahead and get our code here. So this is going to be square root.c++, and this is using the square root function. Now we're going to need to, as always, include our IO stream, and this time we're also going to be including another library or header file called cmath, and this is basically a file that contains a bunch of math-related objects and functions. So as you could imagine, that's where our square root function is going to come from, and if you haven't figured it out by now, that square root function is going to find the square root of a value that we give it. So we're going to use our namespace space std again, and we're going to create a variable here, and we're going to call this variable area, and then we're going to output enter the floor area in square feet of your home. And oops, yeah, that's right. Now, okay, good, that error went away. Thought I might have a syntax error. And then we're going to get some input like we learned in the last thing using our cin command, and we're going to put that value that we get from the user into area. So it's going to be another interactive program. We're going to create another variable called side, and real quick, I didn't mention what double is. Basically, double is similar to an integer, so it's going to get a number, or it's creating a variable that's going to be a number, and we can store a number in. And the difference between an integer and a double, aside from how much space it takes up in memory, is that integers, if you remember, are whole numbers. So they can be negative whole numbers, or they can be positive whole numbers, or they can be zero. And a double is basically we can have not fractions, kind of fractions. We can have numbers with decimals in them. So with integer, if you try to put a decimal in, like 3.2, you're going to get an error because that data type doesn't match what you've entered. If you don't get an error, your program's just not going to work like you expected it to if it takes a decimal value in. So with double, we're going to be able to do that with values negative and positive with decimal. So if we enter 3.4, it'll work fine. So that's why we're using double, and again, we're going to cover all of the different data types in a later section. And for now, we're going to set this newly declared variable side equal to square root area. Okay, and we'll explain that in a second here. For now, we're going to go down and print out some more stuff. equivalent of a square side value. We're going to come down for readability. Oh, goodness. Readability sake, and just to make it look nicer, get it over there. Feet to the side. And we'll get a line break there. And then one more great piece of text. How fascinating. And another line return. Then we're going to return 0. And that's a program. Again, we're going to put in get car so that it pauses at the end. Which it's actually probably not going to pause at the end, just like in the last video we ran into an issue, and I'm going to go over why that was and how we can get around that once I explain the last line of code here that we haven't gone over, this line here that sets side equal to the square root of area, which is the value that we got from the user. So basically this lesson is about functions with return values. Again, this can be covered more when we talk about functions in depth, but basically functions can have a return value just like main has return 0. We can also have functions that do not have a return value, and their return value would be called void since they don't have a return value. And basically the difference between the two is if I were to run a function that has void, so say we have void func name, and we don't, well, say we get an integer from it, and then down here we have it do something and we just go return. It doesn't have to return anything because it is not expecting anything to be returned because it's returning void. Basically this return just tells the function that it's over. Also, if you omit this, it should just hit the end of the code and then that's in the function, and just know that since there's no more code to read, that it's going to return. Now you can't do that with a function that does return something because you're telling it that it's going to return something, so you have to tell it what you're returning. So this would be our and this is actually incorrect. We're going to call this number. And why is this? I don't know. We're going to just leave it blank for now. But basically with this, I think I know why it's doing that. With this function here, it's basically you're just calling a function to run some code, and you're not really expecting anything from it other than to just run that code. So void functions are really useful for just running some code that you need to do a lot in your program. Say like something as simple as just cout you got a point. Now this would be kind of a stupid function because if we were printing out you got a point, we would probably want to actually add the point in the same function. But anyway, say we wanted to tell the person you got a point numerous times in our program. Instead of typing cout you got a point every time, we can just call this function func name to do that. So that's what void functions are handy for, that don't return any values. We're getting an error here because we don't have the using namespace std in our function, and we'll talk about how to get around that in the next video. But so that's void functions, and then we have our functions that have a return value like main up here. So the difference between the two is when you have a return value, you can actually assign or like print out the return value of that function. So since square root basically looks like this, if we were to go to the cmath root and then number, something like that. Oh, whoa, 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 no, no, no. So if we were to do this, and then it would run some code, and then it would return a value from the code. So basically with this function, it would come in here and it would get the square root of the number that you pass into it, and then it would return the square root of that number. So basically, when you have functions like this, you can use them in commands such as this, where we're assigning side the value of square root of area. So this is essentially assigning side the return value of area, which is going to be the square root of area, because that's what the code in here does. Now we can also return strings if we wanted to like print out a string or add this string onto something else or whatever. We could also print instead of actually making this value, we could come in here and change this side, so we could get rid of these two lines and come in here and put in square root area, and then it would just display the return value of that operation here. So that's the difference between functions that have a return value and functions that do not have a return value, and that's pretty much all we're going to talk about in here. There is another thing that is kind of important, and basically that is, if we were making our own function, which we will be in the next program or video, we would need something called a function prototype. And basically what that looks like is name as like this, and then we would do let's say it takes a string. Actually, that's not a good example because it doesn't highlight it blue, so let's do float. It's in a variable we haven't talked about. So this is what a function header looks like, or sorry, function prototype looks like. And basically this is necessary before you actually come down here and make your function, because it tells the compiler what type of data this function is returning, and also is telling it what data type it is taking in for its variables. So if it was taking in 2, we could do a float and an integer, for example. And then when we come down here and actually do the create the function, we could do instead like number and something. And yeah. Anyway, we'll cover that more when we get to it. This probably isn't the best time to introduce function prototypes, so I wouldn't worry about it too much. We're going to go over functions a lot in the future. The main thing about this is functions can return values, and we can assign those values or display them. So yeah. Alright, so let's go ahead and run this program now. Like I said, it's probably not going to work because we're going to run into the same issue that we did in the last episode, and then we'll go ahead and explain why that is and fix it. So here, enter the floor area in square feet of your home. I have no idea what the square feet of my home is, so I'm just going to say 2,000. Seems like a good number. And we're going to hit enter, and it goes away. So why is it going away? Well, when we get the input from cin, it's actually, when we hit that enter key, it's keeping that enter key in the like input buffer, so that when we come down here and do our get car, it's actually seeing that enter key as being present already. So it's just basically we do this, the enter key is still in that buffer, and then this is grabbing that enter key from the buffer and just continuing on. So what we need to do beforehand is cin.get get, and I'm curious if this works as well. It'd be nice to stick with the same command. Let's see. 2000. Yep, okay, so that works too, I think. Yep, okay. So either one works. Basically, cin.get is a different way to do this. I didn't want to use it because it has this weird notation where there's a period here, and that's because, like I mentioned before, cin is actually an object, and this operator here is related to objects. So since we haven't really talked about them a ton, I'd rather stick with a function, which is getCar. So we're going to do that. Now let's go ahead and run it and see our program in motion. So 2000, and it's going to say that's the equivalent of a square 44.7214 feet to the side. How fascinating. So yeah, not the most exciting program, but it teaches us a small little lesson in returning values via functions and how they return values can be used. So we're going to hit enter there, and we are finished with our program. Return code of 0. Everything went fine. So yeah, that's basically going to do it for this episode. In the next one, we're going to talk about functions a little more, and we're actually going to make our own user-defined function and kind of go over the function prototypes a little bit better in that one. So yes, and actually I know why I was getting when I did int func name number. So this will be basically the value that it's taking in. I know why we're getting here an error now. There we go. It's because of that. But again, that's going to be covered in the next episode, so don't worry about it. I'm not going to talk about it right now. Let me run this one more time so it saves everything for me. And 3000. Actually, let's do 3485. Wow, 59.0339 feet to the side. How fascinating. Alright. Hopefully that all that extra stuff that I threw in there that I probably shouldn't have thrown in there wasn't too confusing, but again, hopefully you understand the difference between functions that don't return anything, or void functions, and then functions that do return something, and cool things you can do with them. So that's going to do it for this episode. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed it, go ahead and hit the like button. If you want to see more, definitely feel free to subscribe, and we'll be back later with more functions. Alright, take it easy.